everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. And yes, it is 10:15 p.m. And yes, I just woke up from a nap. The 9:30 p.m. nap, historically known as the dunce's nap. Why are you napping right now? Well, I had such a big dinner. A bowl of tomato soup and some toast. So, I just had to get a nap in before finishing up the day. How are you all? I'll say this, besides the grogginess, I am very excited for today's episode. Excited to introduce this episode because my guest today is Michael Cerveris. And if you don't know who Michael is, why don't I read you his bio right now? Originally from Huntington, West Virginia, Tony Award-winning actor and musician Michael Cerveris got to start acting in the early 80s downtown scene, and his career has flourished from there. As a theater actor, he's won 2 Tony Awards, one for playing John Wilkes Booth in Stephen Sondheim's Assassins, and the second for his role in Fun Home. Beyond the official accolades, though, he's acted in dozens of productions, including Hedwig and the Angry Inch. As a TV and film actor, he's had recurring roles in shows like Mindhunter, Gotham, The Tick, The Good Wife, Treme, and Fringe, as well as many other roles. And as a musician, he's been working professionally ever since he backed Bob Mould on his last Dog and Pony Show tour in 1998. Michael's first solo album was released in 2004, but for the last 8 years, he's been writing and recording with Kimberly Kay under the moniker Loose Cattle. And their first official album, Heavy Lifting, is out now. If you're downloading this today, it comes out. It came out today, wherever you get your records from. Although, if you ask me, I like Bandcamp. But really, whatever platform puts most of the money in the hands of the artist, go to that one. I think it's Bandcamp. Prove me wrong. Anyway, this is a great talk. I've been a fan of Michael's work for over a decade, so it was great to sit down and talk with him. Oh, I should mention, because I cut it out of the beginning of the episode, because you didn't need to hear 3 minutes of me talking about Mabel's chemotherapy. If you're a long-time listener to the show, you know my dog had a mastectomy recently and has been going through chemo, and the chemo is a lot because once she gets the medicine, we being Naomi and myself, have to walk her every 3 to 4 hours for 24 hours, including overnight. And I think we did this interview right after the first cycle of Mabel's chemo, so I think I was exhausted. And I explained that to Michael, and I think it gets referenced later in the interview. So that's why I just wanted to mention it here without having to hear 3 to 4 minutes of me discussing Mabel's chemo. By the way, if you're not a long-time listener and this is your first episode of the show, thank you for checking out Beginnings. If you'd like to check out other episodes, I think they're all there on Spotify. The last 100 should be on whatever podcast app you use. But what I like to do is suggest some episodes for people. A little recommended if you like, such as if you like Michael's work. Why, in this episode, I mentioned Laura Cantrell, who is musically on the same page as Michael, and she's been on an episode. That was really wonderful. Or what about Michael's acting work? Why, I've talked to plenty of actors from stage, such as Halle Pfeiffer, or screen, be they small screen, such as Adam Pally, or Andy Daly, or Fran Kranz, Matt Walsh, Rich Sommer. Who else? DeWanda Wise, Susan Hayward, Aisha Tyler, Abby Milana, Sashir Zameda, and hundreds upon hundreds of other writers and actors and musicians and stand-ups and performers of all stars and stripes. So if you like what you hear and you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible/Amazon, Google, pretty much wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Andy Beckerman on both. I got some great episodes coming up. I gotta say, Lou Barlow from Sebadoh and many other things. That was great. Melvin Gibbs, one of the greatest bass players of the 20th and 21st century, who's played from everyone from Henry Rollins to Sonny Sharrock. Isabel Campbell from Belle and Sebastian. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Michael. I'm curious about this with you, but there was a siren call for me because my parents are from New York. And also, like, the New York where you started out as an artist was kind of the New York that, like, I romanticized. And when I moved there, like, post Giuliani, that was no longer kind of the New York. Like, there were pockets of it. You could find little bits of it, but, like, the New York that, like, you know, like watching a Hal Hartley film or something like that. And I'm like, that's the New York that I want. It was no longer there. And I'm kind of curious because you grew up in West Virginia mostly, right?
Yeah.
Like was there a pull to New York, or was it just like, well, that's where theater is and that's where I'm going to end up?
Well, there wasn't, I have to say, I wasn't that kid who was like dying to get out of his hometown. I really loved West Virginia, and I loved growing up in Huntington, and I didn't really have, I was never really the most ambitious kid. I even remember having a teacher in a summer theater program in North Carolina School of the Arts, who said to me, "You are not ambitious enough to be a successful actor." And I think they were probably kind of right, and I think I've managed to succeed somehow in spite of myself. But so I wasn't, I would watch the Tony Awards and stuff, but I never sort of thought one day I'll be up there, partly because it seemed like the way you got on the Tonys was either by being in musicals or by being British, and I didn't really do either of those things, too legitimately. So it just kind of seemed to be the thing to do after I graduated from college. I thought about doing grad school right after, and most of the people that I knew there said, just why don't you go to New York and see how it is, and then if you feel like there are particular things that you need to get stronger in, then you'll go into grad school like to do that rather than just to avoid the professional world. So that kind of made sense, and I just moved here. But it wasn't like, I don't remember feeling like I've got to be a part of that energy or I've got to be a part of that scene or anything.
Okay. I have about 30 questions, but let me start with like a real boring one, probably. Are the Tony Awards the same kind of... like when I moved out here and I found out that to get an Oscar, you had to campaign for it. So you actually had to
Right.
I have a friend who's a film critic, and she took us to a Get Out for your consideration event. And it looked like a lavish bar mitzvah. It was at this like beautiful outdoor place where they have to have weddings there. And there were, buffet tables, there were open bars. There was a string quartet playing. There was an art exhibit. Jordan Peele was there with the cast, and it had to have cost so much money. And they were, you could see in Jordan Peele's eyes, he was like exhausted by having to do this stuff. And I'm kind of curious
because this wasn't the only one of those things that he was doing, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it also through that, so the question is are the Tonys similar? But through that, if you are kind of like, well, I'm not that ambitious, I'm curious about like, did you have to push yourself to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I would say I've had to push myself at pretty much every juncture in my career. From my first, I remember very distinctly my first meetings with agents, because I went to Yale undergrad, and even though what people think of at Yale is usually the grad school, where Meryl Streep went and all those people. But the fact that I had Yale on my resume meant that my random headshot coming through the door actually might mean that I would get a meeting. And so I would show up and they would say, so, did we see you at the league auditions? And I'd be like, no, that was the grad school. And they're like, oh, but you must have been in a class with, Rock Dutton or John Turturro. And like, no, they were in the grad school. But it didn't matter because I was in the office now at that point. And so I remember my first interviews were like, so Michael, I see you're from West Virginia. Yeah, yes, Huntington. And your father and mother were in the arts. Yes, he was a music professor, and she was a modern dancer. And like, I had no game whatsoever. And I finally had one agent at the end of our interview say, okay, I'm going to give you some advice. We're not going to represent you now, but we'll keep track of you. But just so you know, these interview things are about letting people have a feeling that they know you. And I get it. You know that it's all artificial, and how are they possibly going to really know you in 2 minutes or whatever? But you have to at least let them think that maybe they do. You have to give them some information. You have to give them some personality, something. So even at that bare minimum level, I had to learn to be more just less kind of hidden and less sort of. It wasn't that I was disinterested. I mean, I wanted to have an agent, but I just didn't want to sell myself. And so to answer your question, yes, the Tonys are absolutely like that. And people and it's hard because unlike a movie where you've done your work already and you're, probably like a year or more ago, and you might be doing another job at the time, and that will make it difficult. But for the most part, what you're doing in that canvas campaign time is just that. When you're doing a show on Broadway, you're doing your actual job 8 times a week.
Right.
Plus, you're doing all these things, during the days and after the show, and it's really incredibly exhausting. Also, because producers have learned that it's easier if you open your show right before the cutoff deadline to be eligible, suddenly which is usually like late April. So that's why you see in the last 2 or 3 weeks of April, like every night is another huge opening of a Broadway show because they all want to open just in time to get nominations and not have to run too long before the awards, which they hope they will, get some attention from. Oh. So you've just finished the most exhausting part of the whole process, which is previews, which is rehearsing all day and doing your show at night. You finally got into opening night and probably record your cast album if you're in a musical right around that time. So you're already burnt out and, you feel like you've just gotten to the finish line, and then you realize, oh no, there's a whole mountain I still have to climb for the next 6 weeks if I'm lucky enough to be in a show that's nominated and be nominated myself. So it's exhausting. And the first time I went through it, I was completely worn out. That was for Tommy. But I was also on such an adrenaline high because everything about that show was exciting and that whole experience. And in subsequent times, I was able to sort of know where I needed to spend my energy and where I didn't, and put things in a little more perspective. But it's hard because even if you're not feeling super ambitious for yourself, you want your show to do well. You want to, have the best shot at getting attention. And it's just impossible to swim without getting wet. So if you're going to be doing a show, you're going to be in the environment where whether you feel super competitive or not, everybody around you is going to be coming up and saying, I think your show's going to win. I think you're going to win. And it's another job to kind of keep that out of your mind as much as possible and just do the thing that by the time you get to the actual awards night, there's part of you that's like, I really don't care what happens. I'm just really looking forward to going back to my actual regular job tomorrow night,
Okay, so one of the things that I guess that I'm curious about is this, you know, self-professed lack of ambition. Yet at the same time, you know, at some point, I don't know if it's you or your parents, you know, you go from high school in West Virginia to a pretty elite private school. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I'm from Exeter
Where?
Township in Reading,
yeah.
Pennsylvania. And so when I would tell people like, oh yeah, I went to Exeter, people would get really impressed.
Like, ooh.
And it took me a long time to like realize, like my wife went to Dalton, and she like, I think she had to explain to me that she's like, no. When you say Exeter, people think the Exeter Academy. They think
Phillips Exeter,
right?
yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Because that just like, from Pennsylvania, that kind of like, I didn't have an understanding. I should have probably gone to Penn. Like, I had a choice between going to Penn and going to Pitt. And I was like, oh, well, I'll probably have more fun going to Pitt. Like, because, you know, I like the punk music scene in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And if I had any idea of what I was going to be doing, I would have been like, no, I should have gone to Penn. So I could have like, that would have been a better kind of launching pad for a career. And I'm just kind of curious about like, it seems like interesting to me that like, did you know about like that would like kind of like put you in a certain path?
No, well, this is a kind of a perfect example of exactly what I was describing, because I grew up in Huntington. We used to go to Pitt. My dad is from Pittsburgh, so we used to go up to Pittsburgh all the time. And I love it there. And you're right about the punk rock musical scene. Do you know Homeless Gospel Choir? Do you know that guy? Oh, he's awesome. You should check him out. He's doing this sort of acoustic punk folk thing, and he's a great songwriter and it's really good. You should check him out.
Oh, I will. That's awesome.
So I was, you know, happily going along in West Virginia, and hadn't really gotten to the point of thinking about college, but I sort of don't think I was imagining doing anything other than going to Marshall University in my hometown, where my dad was teaching anyway. And one day I was in the National Junior Honor Society in my junior high school, which, you know, just meant that I had a B average or better. I think it wasn't, you know, super competitive in my
Right.
junior high. We mostly just like sold milk at lunch to make money for a trip to Gettysburg, I think, you know, or Williamsburg or something. So they brought in this guy from Phillips Exeter who was from somewhere in the area and had gone there, and he was a recruiter guy. And they, you know, Exeter really makes a real effort to get a varied student body. And so they send people out across the country and across the globe to tell people about the school and see if anyone's interested. So they brought a bunch of us to this thing in the library, and we got out of some class to hear this presentation and slideshow. And, you know, it was incredibly impressive. The school is amazing. And I, you know, I watched it and thought, you know, that's interesting. I didn't think it had anything to do with me, and it didn't make me want to sign up. It just was like, well, I didn't even realize that was a thing. At the end of that period, he hadn't quite finished his presentation, and they said, if you want to stay for the rest of the presentation, you can miss part of your next period. And the next class was a class that I really didn't want to go to. I really didn't like the teacher, and my friends felt similarly. So we all said, oh, yes, no, we'd love to watch. So we stayed for the rest of it and then went down to the class, and that teacher knew exactly what was up and dragged us to the vice principal's office and said, these boys aren't interested in that school at all. They just wanted to be out of my class. And of course I had to say, oh no, I'm very interested. And in fact, you know, please have material sent to my home because, you know, I'm really curious about this thing. So this stuff shows up at my house, and my parents, who I didn't know, but were very concerned about the fact that I never brought homework home from school because classes were slow enough I could do my homework for other classes in my classes.
Yes.
So by the end of the day, I was just like, could ride my bike for the rest of the evening.
That was my entire senior year.
Yeah, exactly. And and they didn't see that as a positive thing the way I did, and they wanted me to be, have more opportunities. So they really encouraged me to apply and do the essays and the whole thing, and I did it really out of curiosity and because I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to get into a place like that, and really no way that we could ever afford to send me there. So I'll play along. It's it's an interesting experience, but I'm not ever going to have to pony up for any of this. And every hurdle I just managed to clear somehow. I think possibly because I was one of a very few number of applicants from West Virginia, and had shoes and all my own teeth and everything. So I satisfied some geographic distribution requirement for them or something.
Right.
But
Enough bicuspids.
so I got, yeah, exactly. So I got accepted, and because Exeter has a need-blind application policy, they just make it work financially for you to go with the combination of scholarships and jobs at the school and stuff. I worked in the post office and the dining halls and stuff, and so now and we even did we drove up to Exeter to have the visit there and an interview up there, and that again was amazing. And it was I think it was in the fall, but it's New Hampshire, so it gets dark at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and people are going to school at night up till 7 o'clock, and it's crazy because it's looked like a college to me. And I remember driving back and thinking, I'm really glad I saw that. That was really interesting. I'm never going to see it again, but that was cool to have done. And then, a few weeks later, I got the letter that I was accepted, and I remember sitting in my family's kitchen and decide, because I needed to decide what I was going to do. And my parents were very keen on me going. They weren't going to force me to, but they really were encouraging me to. And I realized as I talked to them that I had no burning desire to leave and to go to school someplace else. But the more we talked, the more I kind of realized if I leave here now, somehow I knew I would never be content with the small town life that I would be leaving. If I didn't leave, I would be perfectly happy here, I think. But I knew somehow that if I left, that was going to kind of be it. It was going to be a one-way thing. And then slowly it dawned on me that I thought for whatever reason that I wasn't supposed to be content with this, small town life. I was supposed to do something more. I didn't know what exactly, maybe theater, maybe music, maybe something in the arts, or maybe something else. But I somehow sensed that I just wasn't supposed to settle for this. And
you had never had that feeling before? Because when I was a teenager, I started having I wasn't very in touch with my emotions at all. And but I had this kind of inkling. I had this kind of amorphous feeling I don't want, I love my parents. There's nothing wrong with their lives or anything like that. I just don't want that for myself. And I knew I just didn't know how to get there or what I wanted to do. But there was some kind of just thing pushing me from the inside, and only later, after I've had therapy and I can figure that stuff out. Right. But yeah. You never, this was the first moment that you had any kind of inkling.
Yeah. I mean, I'd participated in plays in school and in community theater stuff. And my dad would music direct summer stock productions in Eastern Kentucky. And so we would go for the summer and do that. So I knew that I had somewhat of an aptitude for it, and that I enjoyed doing it a lot. But I don't think I had that next thought of, I really want to take it to the next level. I think I thought I would just stay somewhere vaguely in the area and do that here, not really considering that that's not possible to have a career doing that here. I mean, I could have taught, perhaps, maybe that was what I was thinking, but I don't, I didn't, I did always feel like a fish out of water there because despite the fact that I grew up all of my kind of, conscious years there, my parents weren't from there. So I, and they were focused on the arts and focused on cultural things. And so I always sort of had this dual life of trying to fit in and being like all the rest of my classmates who had all the same experiences and ran track and played Little League and all that stuff. But I was always aware that we weren't like all the other families. And I guess that also kind of kept me from, I think that was another thing that helped me feel like I'm not supposed to just stay here and just do this. And as much as I really wanted to fit in and belong, I didn't always. And that's a real through line through my whole life, is feeling slightly out of sync with my environment. And it's even, it's true in the theater world, the kinds of, I'll be the one guy in a musical who's, going to see almost exclusively straight plays when I go out to see things, or the one guy in a play who's running from the curtain call to try to catch the last few songs of some, indie band downtown. And conversely, I'm the one guy in, a touring band who's also going to stop if we're in a town and try to, catch the local regional theater thing or something. So I've tried to make peace with that, but I think it is part of what helped me feel like, I guess I'm supposed to not just stay here. I'm supposed to at least try to do something more with these skills I seem to have.
Yeah, that alienation, man, that resonates with me so much because all of my interests are totally like, I was on the way to being a philosophy professor. I was a philosophy professor, an adjunct, but like to getting my PhD, and then like everywhere, I was in an indie rock band. I was, whether I'm in a writer's room or so, like, it's always like my interests are always like at odds with whatever group. And I don't know if it's like purposeful. Like, I don't know if like, I'm like, I gotta be a contrarian in some like unconscious or subconscious part of my brain or what it is. Cause it's just like, I don't know. I'm curious if you've thought about like where that comes from. Cause like, it really, that resonates with me so deeply.
Yeah. I have spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I have sometimes I feel like I've come up with answers, and other times I feel like I just don't really know. It's funny. I was in school. But one of the reasons I went to Yale was because I wanted a full liberal arts education and not just to go to a conservatory, because I wasn't certain that was what I was going to try to do. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to be a philosophy and theater double major because, if the theater thing doesn't work out, philosophy is a great, fallback business,
Can I just tell you how insane that was? Because that was what I told my parents. Because there was a point where like especially when I went to grad school, where I'm like, well, I'm just getting this PhD in case like comedy doesn't work out. And what an insane, like, and obviously like at the time, like I didn't think about, I didn't, have any kind of like, I couldn't frame that in any real way where I'm just like, oh yeah, that's absurd.
Yeah, no, philosophy is where the big bucks are. That's, but I don't know exactly where it comes from. I can point to things like having parents that weren't raised in the place where I was growing up, and whereas pretty much everybody else's parents were a couple generations deep in West Virginia. And West Virginia is a particularly proud people of their place and of their state, and resistant to people with ideas from outside as well, for better and worse. So I think that's part of it. And I think part of it was just having so many interests and not being willing to kind of compromise on any of them, and just sort of wanting to pursue all of them all the time.
Yeah.
And I guess having enough ability to kind of keep all the plates spinning that I didn't have to choose exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to reckon with myself at some point that like it's okay to like I'm going to use the word dilettante not exactly in the right way, but like it's okay to be a dilettante as long as you are good at the things that you are like pursuing all these different paths, right? It's okay if you're as long as it's not just if it's one thing if it would just be like flights of fancy and I would just follow whatever thing, but like, you know.
Right. No, but if you're genuinely interested in all of those things and care in a serious way, I agree, and I've had to talk myself into that too sometimes because it really contributes to major imposter syndrome all the time because I'm constantly feeling like if I'm around somebody that I think is the real deal in whatever that is, whether it's just born and raised in the place that I aspire to be accepted by, or playing in a band, or being in a show, it's very easy for me to feel like I'm going to be called out any second and shown the door because they're going to know that I'm not really, really a part of things. It even was true in school in terms of, the cliques around school. Like I had friends who were brainy nerds, and I had friends who were stoner guys, and I had friends who were jocks, and I had friends who were arty kids, because I never belonged so completely to any one group that the others would identify me with that group. So I kind of was allowed to participate on the fringes or, near the inner edges of those groups. But then when they really closed ranks and it was really like the hardcore thing, then I was always, aware that I was on the outside of that. And I don't know how much of it is me choosing that and how much of it was just what I was kind of given, Like there are things that I probably could have done or not done that would have allowed me to be more fully any one of those things. And I didn't. So, and that was a choice whether I knew it or not,
Yeah, but it's also like I feel like I would be cutting off part of myself if I only did X, Y, or Z. I mean, it's exhausting, like having to do like 10 different things every day plus live your life. But it would feel really hollow, I think, if I was like, well, I'm never going to I'm not going to listen to music anymore, play music or whatever it is, right?
And kind of dishonest in a way because, it's not truly who you are. You are all those things. And I confront this especially exactly at this kind of nexus point between in music and theater, because especially in the music world, and especially not so much I've discovered over the years, not so much among actual musicians, the people that I know who are so identified with one particular genre of music or something, and their fans are all about how hardcore that guy is in that scene or whatever, would never believe the truth that they actually read books that are way outside of that, or they go to plays, or they like the ballet or whatever. People who are creative and interesting are usually so much more broadly interested in a variety of things than their fans think. But it's primarily like the industry and the labels and journalists and who for whatever reason, and maybe just expediency, want to just kind of have people be one thing and are sort of looking for some idea of credibility so that they can weed out, and not have to pay attention to as many people. And so from day one, I mean, I've played music as long as I've acted, but I've mostly, surprisingly, I've made money acting, which is, a rare enough thing in itself. But, and I've mostly only lost money playing music most of the time. But because I've done both things, it's such a hard thing sometimes to get people to pay to treat my musical stuff seriously and to be convinced that I am as, sincere in doing that stuff and I get it. Like when I hear about some actor who's got a band, I'm like, ooh, yeah, really?
Yeah, I mean, you are fighting that.
I guess
you're
try.
fighting because here's the rare thing, which is like you are an actor who's also a very good musician, right? And you're fighting against like other like Bruno. What is Bruce Willis? Like you're fighting against someone who has like a vanity project who is I can't get in Bruce Willis's head, but like do you know what I mean? Like there is this kind of like tradition of it being a vanity project as opposed to like, no, you're a very good musician playing like, I don't know what I would classify. I was going to say country, alt country. I'm not even sure how to like exactly. It's just like in the realm of like music I like Laura Cantrell, like that kind of like,
yeah.
Kind of like, this speaks very deeply to me, right?
Laura is why our band is called what it is, actually.
Really?
Yeah, she was having a CD release show at Hill Country Barbecue, this place in New York, and I had sung backing vocals on one of the songs, so she had me come up and sing with her, and Kimberly and I were putting the band together, and we didn't have a name for it yet, and there's a photograph on the wall there. They have lots of like Texas Hill Country memorabilia and stuff on the walls, and there's a photograph of a road sign that was warning people about loose livestock, which I guess is a problem when you're driving across Texas. And I misremembered it as loose cattle, and it seemed to be like the perfect description of our our motley gang. So that's so I owe that to Laura.
Yeah. Like there is this kind of like you were saying, like expediency. I'm going to say laziness. The more that I'm in this industry, the more I see just people are just kind of lazy. Like your agent or your manager will just take the first offer given and then they'll be like, here it is. And you're like, oh, I guess I'll take that. And like, it's like, and then you find out later, you're like, they could have like asked for more money or something like that. I don't mean that in a like greedy way. I mean that in a like paying your bills way. Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I really do think, like, and I used to like write music criticism and I would constantly because I was writing stuff that was like a lot more like cultural criticism or like placing music within the context. And I would look at other writers and I'd be like, oh, you're just kind of using like the same 10 adjectives over and over again in your work. And you're just saying like, it sounds like blank. And then, moving on with your day. And I think
you're basically being one of those algorithms that, puts Spotify playlists together.
Yes. And I think as opposed to like a curator or like a commentator, I think more and more people are motivated by laziness, and with laziness, number one, expediency, number two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, with the barrage of stuff now, it is hard. I think in the 70s it probably was a lot easier, and I remember because I was growing up in the 70s, and I remember listening to the radio, and I wasn't conscious of it at the time, and it was really radio in England that kind of reminded me of this, because radio in England in the 90s, despite the rise of Britpop and everything, you would hear all kinds of variety of stuff, even on the most kind of hip stations. And I remembered growing up, I would hear like a soul song, a funk song, Don McLean song, REO Speedwagon. Like there was a wide range of stuff in 1 hour on the radio, and I think there was just sort of, you had the idea that good music was good music and good songwriting was good songwriting, and people listen to a variety of things, and it's so easy now to just go down one avenue, and you almost want to do that because there's so much, it gets exhausting to try to keep your ears open and stuff. So I agree, it is laziness, especially if your job is to be aware and put things in a context and consider where the artist is from and what they're trying to do and all the rest of it. But
Yeah. I also
but yeah, it's hard.
I don't think there's pressures on the people to do more. I think that like
You think there is pressure?
I don't
on
think
people
there
to do
is, and I think that they are. I don't think that it's weird. You know, the more I keep saying the more that I do this, but it really is that where I like every time like the longer that I'm in this business, every year I'm like, well, I finally figured everything out. And then I find out that I'm like, oh, no. Every year the rug is pulled out from under me and I have something else to learn. Like, hey, read your contracts with a fine-tooth comb, even if other people are supposed to. But there's did you ever read Pierre Bourdieu? He's like a French sociologist. He's great.
Yeah.
I love him. He has this term called habitus, which are like the unspoken rules of any group. It's the like vibe, maybe if I'm talking in like 2021 language, is the vibe of a group. And I just think the vibe of like mass media or is just like, we don't have to do much. We're just like, we're either stenographers or we serve a PR function. And we don't have to think about any of this stuff deeply because no one cares.
Well, I think the adoption of the word content for all of what we do, I think, is indicative of how skewed our perspective is and our priorities are, and I think it's what makes it possible for you to do exactly what you're talking about, to just kind of feel like, hey man, it's not a big deal, I'm just kind of moving shit around and shining it up and putting it in the right lighting for people or whatever, because none of it actually means anything or matters. It's all just content.
When you were growing up, did you have like a deeper kind of connection to creating things? Did you have like this like it meant more than content to me, right? When I was growing up, It was like something, it was vital to me, and it still is today. And exactly what you said, like that idea of content, it's just so like it just rubs me in the wrong way because I'm like, no, I put a lot of time into like even a dumb tweet, I put a lot of time into to write a joke. Man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll like edit and re-edit and wring my hands over it until I feel like I've finally got it. Yeah. Simple emails to people that take me fucking forever.
Yep.
Because I want to make sure I have the tone right and that it won't be, misread or misunderstood. And I spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about all of that because I think I learned this from my father, who was as I said, a classical pianist and educator and college professor, and my mom, who was a modern dance student at Juilliard. They met at Juilliard, and they both chose not to have performing careers. They decided to go into teaching, but I had such a respect for the people that they admired, and then the teachers that I had growing up also were like, this is a thing. If that Rilke thing, if you can think of something else to do, you should do it, in Letters to a Young Poet. It's like, yeah, that's what, if you don't care enough to really invest in all of it and most importantly, with no guarantee or even likelihood of any kind of reward, because that's the thing I see so much now is everything is a negotiation. Like, I hate to sound like the guy yelling at the kids to get off his yard, but I see so much in younger people that are all like, well, what's in this for me, and what kind of return am I going to see on this in the next week or months or whatever? Not sort of like, I just have to do this thing. I have to make this stuff. I don't know if anyone will ever listen to it. In a way, I don't really care whether anyone ever listens to it, or even if you tell me that no one is ever going to listen to it, I'm still going to do it because I need to. And that's the way I've felt about pretty much everything that I've done. And I happen to get rewarded and recognized and given a way to pay my bills by doing that with my acting work, and that's ridiculously fortunate situation to be in. Period. But even in the choices that I made about shows I would do, I often would not choose the thing that would be the logical career move thing, because that wasn't what was interesting to me. What was interesting to me was this thing that I wasn't sure I could even do, or might, be terrible at, but I hadn't done that before, so I'll try that. And even those somehow ended up moving me along a good path. So, I've been, my guardian angels have been working overtime. But in music, it's been more kind of, there have been plenty of reasons not to continue doing stuff, because I do think I had dreams of being a touring musician and being at a certain level that I just never did and never will. Mm-hmm. And I've come to accept that's okay. And I try. It's hard because, like I was saying with the Tony's thing, it's like if you're gonna make a record and you're gonna put it out, every time I go through the whole, like, should I even bother, like, trying to get a PR person to send this out? Should I do anything other than press like 50 copies of vinyl because it's only a record if it's on vinyl to me, and should we even make CDs and all of that, or should we just play in the living room, like which the original idea of Loose Cattle was, just do it for fun in people's living rooms. And once you get started, then we did it with this record. It was originally just going to be, we're just going to do it sort of cheap and easy, just to have this band finally have a record out on, a studio album. This is kind of our debut studio album, even though the band's been together for like 8 years or 9 years now. And initially it was just going to be, we'll just play everything live and we won't really overdub and then we did that and was like, well, but it sounds good. And if we spend a little more time on it, it could sound really good. And then, well, now we've made this really good record. I would like people to hear it. I guess, we should find somebody to help us get it out and get some attention for it and stuff. And so then you find yourself down the road and you're going, well, here I am again.
Yeah. Well, let me say this and see if this fits. You have two Juilliard trained parents, right? And I'm sure you start making things at a very young age, right?
Mm-hmm.
More often than not on this show, when I talk to people who are very talented, especially in like more than one area, it's because they've been doing that stuff since they were very young. Yeah. And so, the habits and just the just the things that you learn. Okay, I'm writing my first movie now. And it's, after like writing like TV shows for so long, it's like a new thing to me. And if I just even thought like, oh, this is a thing that I'm going to do, and I'd started writing it like a decade ago, I would have learned a lot of things that I'm now just learning as I'm like, wait, I should go back and add this. And I keep I basically like every time I sit down to write the draft, I rewrite it from the beginning so I can because I'm learning something new every time that I'm like, and if I had started doing that thing a decade ago, or if I had just been like, oh, as a child, maybe this would be fun, and started then, I would have learned certain things that other people learned earlier. This is making any sense at all. I'm just trying to figure out about like when you were a child, like you're already doing this stuff. So like by the time you are, you get to New York and you start playing music and you start acting in the early 80s, you're already like far ahead of other people who maybe only started in high school, say, or college.
Well, yeah, that is true. I mean, as a kid, I remember my parents enrolled me in this talented and gifted program thing in school. So, like, I think it was once a week or once every other week, I would go to the special center with other kids who had a variety of interests and abilities, and we were exposed to all kinds of other things that, we wouldn't have been otherwise. And that was an amazing thing. What it did for some kids was give them a direction in one direction. What it did for me was give me like 10 new directions.
Me too.
And I was like, oh, okay. So, and because I guess I thought this is what you're supposed to do, why would they present you with all these things if they didn't mean for you to pursue all of them? So, and they didn't make you feel like, oh no, you need to decide on which one to be interested in. So I remember my friends and I made a little like our version of Mad Magazine it was called Zap Magazine. It was a little early mimeograph zine. And I loved to draw. I would do life drawing classes and I'm trying to remember. I didn't write music so much as a kid, but I loved to write stories and I loved to just write in general. And then, I was doing plays and things. And I do think in a way that the musical part of it, I was always the most protective and shy about because I had an example in my father of what a musician to me was, which was somebody who has devoted their life exclusively to this. And, we would go to sleep to him practicing every night, and he knew theory and had studied and really mastered his instrument. I didn't do that. He insisted that all the kids study an instrument for a year, and then if we didn't want to do it past that, that was up to us. But he kind of felt like he owed it to his art to at least try to give that to his kids. So I started in fourth grade on violin, which is like not now. I wish I had kept it up. I'd love to be a great fiddle player, but it wasn't the thing to play in fourth grade, and so I switched to guitar kind of halfway through and finished out my year doing that, and then put it away, and picked it up again some years later when I was like 13 or something. I guess not surprisingly, and sort of retaught myself by ear then, and just learned songs from the radio and stuff. So I became decent enough in junior high, but I never thought of myself as a musician and even as a singer, because I didn't think that I had done the work you need to do to earn the title of musician. So I think I was interested in it, but I never really identified as it out of shyness and a feeling like I hadn't earned it. And it wasn't until, and I had bands in junior high and in college I would play in pickup bands and stuff. And I was just reading this biography of the Athens scene and starting with the B-52s and Pylon and all of that and up through REM, and just reading the whole thing. And it was like kind of around the time when I was in college, and I was like, oh man, if I was going to do this all over again, I would have gone to UGA and would have ended up with the music career I always wanted. So I was always playing music, but I never identified myself to people as a musician at all until I went to LA, and I was hired out of New York to play Ian Ware, this English guitar student, on the last season of Fame. And so I go out to LA, and I'm this kind of gloomy emo rock character. And because I'm me, I was going out to clubs all the time and seeing music. And this was when like Guns N' Roses was just starting up, and I saw Jane's Addiction's like second show at the Scream Club, and so I was hanging out with a lot of musicians, and they would see Fame because it was on Saturdays and rebroadcast on Sundays around like 5 o'clock. So on Saturday, it would be on when people were getting ready to go out. And on Sunday, it would be on when people were like slowly getting up. So a lot of them would see the show. So they kind of, in LA, you are what you pretend to be. So I was kind of accepted as being part of that scene. And so I would get to know these people. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not the greatest guitar player in the world or songwriter, but I'm kind of as good as that guy, and he's got like a 5-record deal. So maybe I should actually finish a song and maybe not just apologize for having some musical ability and just actually do it. But I feel like you, if I had been doing that and had that confidence or just, fuck it kind of feeling, I could have gotten so much farther. I think I'd stopped myself from doing it a lot when I was younger. I remember in college even, there was I don't remember what the class was, but I started making these montage kind of looping things with bits of found audio and, just finding a groove from some record and laying that underneath it and putting all this stuff. And this was like 5 years before My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, and I was like, if I had stuck to this, I could have been Brian Eno, So I always was finding myself having these ideas and doing these things and then feeling like everybody else kind of figured it out a few years later, but I never did anything with it at the time, So
it's because I
woulda, coulda.
I think, and I don't know if this is the same for you, but it's because I have so many interests and I follow all of them at the same time. I advance more slowly than I think, and advance
in any single thing.
By the way, in quotes, advance. I just mean like get more competent at doing X, Y, or Z, or like getting more. Really, it's like asymptotically, like getting closer to the thing in my head, realizing the thing in the world that's in my head, and that's really like, I guess, craft. I don't know like how you want to define that, but or becoming more just like existentially fulfilled, like actually like being like, oh yeah, this is like, this thing finally makes me feel good inside, as opposed to just like the void and just like, what's the next thing I have to do? I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely. And I think if you are a person who needs to make things, then you just do. You have to, and you find ways to. And I think there's a very, very distinct difference between the people who are making things in order to do something, like in order to be famous or be successful or be wealthy or be awarded things, as opposed to the people who all those other things might be nice results from the thing that they actually care about, which is the making of the things. And that's because that seeing the thing that you saw in your head or hearing the thing that you saw in your head is an essential part of who you are, and that's why you're going to do it, whether anybody pays attention or pays you for it or not.
Yeah.
And I think I also wish that I had understood that and embraced it and accepted it earlier also, because that would have given me a lot more peace early on, instead of being frustrated that nobody was listening or feeling or doubting myself because I wasn't getting acknowledged in the ways that I wanted to for whatever thing. Or just putting energy into doing things with it that you don't really want to do with it, but you get convinced, but I need to, try to get this heard by so-and-so. And like, I only care about that because somebody told me I should probably care about that. And it's nothing but endless frustration.
Yep.
And if I just hadn't bothered in the first place, I probably would have had a lot more time to do what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah. Do you know, like, was there a point, or maybe, I know it's a process, so like maybe there was just a point where you kind of realized it. but like, were you kind of reckoned with like this regret? Or I know it was like you were kind of joking about like, if I could do it over again, I would move to Athens, right? But like, do you know like when you started to like reckon with that kind of stuff? And I had like always wanted to be Bob and David. I always wanted to be Mr. Show, right? And then at some point, I just had to reckon with like I missed the sketch boom in New York. By the time that I moved there after grad school and everything like that, all the sketch groups had moved away and like had already like done other things, and I just missed it. It was just bad timing, and I just had to reckon.
Right.
It took me a while, but I eventually just had to just kind of like, okay, well, that's not my path. I just don't. And I'm kind of curious about those kind of moments with other people.
I think that moment probably, I'm hoping it's going to be like in July of this year, or no, I mean, I think for me it's kind of come by degrees over time. I think there was a while up through. Well, when I toured with Bob Mould, and then when that tour was over, I stayed in London for a while, and I was dating this girl who was in a band, her name Charlotte Hatherley. She was in the band Ash, and so I had some sort of footing because I had played with Bob, so people allowed me into the the music scene there, and because of Charlotte, I would be, at their shows all the time and hanging out. So I was also a little burned out on acting at that point anyway. So I really thought I was going to put all my energy into music. And I was living in London and playing shows, and I put a band together there. And, we were playing shows in Camden. And I remember like Coldplay was just kind of getting started, and they knew the Ash gang. So our first show in Camden was like attended by the guys from Coldplay and the guys from Ash, and it, I felt like, and I had just done this tour, which was the first tour I'd ever done where somebody else like put my amps on stage, which was really thrilling for me. And so I think that was the height of feeling like maybe I was actually going to do this, and but I was even, again, I was a fish out of water in so many ways because I was American and luckily didn't sound too American. So people thought sometimes I was Irish or Canadian. So, I got more of a pass for hanging out, or got less shit given to me by, everybody around me.
Was this the Bush years?
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, well, actually I was in London for 9/11 too. I was still there. So yeah, we weren't the most popular people in the world. As opposed to now where,
yeah, people love us.
yeah. So I think it was sometime after, that didn't happen. Like that was the most concerted attempt to really sort of, live the life of a musician. And I made a record and, did it at Rockfield with my friend Nick Bryan, who had worked on the Oasis records and stuff. So I was like, I had all of the elements available to me that other people would have loved to have, and that out of those places and those people were getting record deals and people were doing stuff. And, I sent it cold to a bunch of labels and stuff, and got, lukewarm to no response. And, but I was this guy who was just like the sideman for Bob Mould was my biggest calling card at that point. And I wasn't 20 and I didn't have a great haircut. And so, I had a lot of things working against me. But it could have happened. Like I listen to those songs now, and I think somebody could have picked up on this if they had wanted to, and maybe if I'd had more confidence or more believed in myself as a musician more then, and kind of presented myself more that way, I think I probably kind of apologized for myself a lot because I know for a fact that I didn't. Like, I was hoping somebody would believe me and give me the keys to be a real part of things, but I don't know that I had that same kind of thing. And I think that it's a thing you have when you're younger too, where you're just like, yeah, I totally fucking belong here, and you should listen to my record because it's fucking great.
I didn't have that.
It's amazing the people that I've known who have that and maybe not a lot else, but get so much further than people who have so much more to offer, but just don't have that thing.
Yeah, the dynamics of this are so weird because you can be extremely talented, but not know. Like, I mean, here's a real dumb thing, but like I've noticed that a lot of people in the last couple years maybe don't have like the chops, but hired the right PR person or signed with the right manager, and that's it. And like like I know people personally who are I look, I don't mean this in like a negative. I don't mean this. Look, not talented. I know people who are absolutely just not talented at whatever they're doing, but there's an apparatus that was built around them that puts them in the right place, and then they get the things right. And I don't mean that in a I'm not like being I've told you my brain is just atrophying as we're talking, but like in a jealous way. I don't mean, I'm just like, okay, no, they can do like their thing. I get it. I get what this game is a little bit, but like, and then someone who's just like, I know people who are like extremely talented at X, Y, or Z, and they're doing well, but they're not like at these like stratospheric levels that the other people who just like hired the right publicist, had the money to hire the right publicist, and that's it. And it's just like,
or wrote the right song at the right time,
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, because I'm conscious of that, I'm also conscious of that there are plenty of people, and people that I went to school with, or people that I know who are extraordinarily talented and gifted musicians, actors, whatever, who would have loved to and absolutely deserve to and should have had the opportunities and successes that I've had. And I know that I don't deserve them any more than they do. I work really hard, and I try to deserve the breaks that I get, but I also recognize that I got some breaks that are why I got access to some opportunities that other people I know didn't. And it's not because I'm so much more talented than they are or so much more hardworking. And in fact, I might be less talented and less hardworking than they are. And it just didn't happen somehow, or hasn't happened yet for them in that way. So I get it, and it's not fair, and it's not entirely based on merit, any of it.
Yeah, but like sometimes like people, like what I do like about this is that like it's not based on merit, but you can kind of tell, especially like talking to someone, like talking to you for this last hour or so, right? You are like, you are talented, and also you have the kind of like right existential way of thinking about this stuff. Not right in any kind of like objective terms, but like you seem like very even keeled emotionally. You seem like you have like kind of like understand what the game is in a certain way, and you're talented at the same time in a lot of different directions, which I think is interesting.
Well, thanks. And I think that I'm always kind of amazed. I feel like the machinery around making things, the machinery around creativity, whether it's, in whatever art form or just being creative in your profession, but there is so much opportunity for you to be humbled at any moment by
Yes.
by everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me the people who manage to go through the whole thing, and that's not the lesson that they learn. The lesson that they learn is that they can walk on water and people should bow down to them. Like I have never gotten that message from any aspect of the business. Most of it is you're lucky to have what you have. You should appreciate it and don't count on it.
How much of that do you think is making it precarious so that you'll just take whatever is handed you?
Yeah, well, that definitely is something, and I mean, I have to say that I've turned down opportunities at a time in my career where I shouldn't have been turning down anything, just because but that I think is back to what we were talking about, when you feel so invested in making things. I know how I am when I take on a job or a project, and I know how much I'm going to invest in it, whether it's a silly, fun thing for entertainment's sake mostly, or whether it's some deep, heavy, artistic thing. I'm going to put everything I have into it, and it's exhausting, and it comes at a cost of a lot of the rest of my life too. Mm-hmm. So I've got to believe in it at least enough to make it worth what I know is going to be my level of sacrifice. And someone can say, "Oh man, it's just like a quick money gig. It doesn't have to be that big a deal." But that's not going to matter to me, and I know I'm going to invest in it. So if I don't feel like I can care at least that much about it, I'm not the guy to be doing it. You should have somebody else who wants to do it for whatever their reason is. And it doesn't matter if it's going to be like a big success for whoever does it. It should be a big success for somebody else, not me. And I'll just do, this other downtown thing that I care about, and and I guess it's just how I was wired somehow, and how the people that I've admired were wired also. I mean, I guess I was probably drawn to them because I recognize that somehow.
Well, do you mind if I ask one more question? Because that's the thing that I've been it's been kind of rattling around in my head, which is were you always this way? Do you think in your childhood and in your teenage years, you've just kind of unfurled in some way? What was it like then? Were you that even keeled? Were you that kind of existentially, had an existential equilibrium, let's say?
Yeah, or just like a deeply melancholic aspect from the time I was little. Mm-hmm. It's funny, we've got these great old Super 8 home movies of Christmases and stuff when I was growing up, and I am so much the, just introspective child on Christmas morning. My sister's bouncing off the walls and dancing around all over the place, and I'm deeply connected to my Matt Mason space station, and having my dad put that together for me, and we're really focusing on my Spider-Man doll. I think I've always had some aspect of that, and the way that I have things that took my attention, I think when I was younger, took it to the exclusion of everything else for the time that I was focusing on it. And I think, it's very much like those the 7-Up, 14-Up, the Apted movies. If give me the child at 7 and I'll give you the man. I think there's a lot in that. And when you look at me in these videos and photographs, I think that this kid is just headed for this life, whether he likes it or not.
Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. This was, I don't know. You as a person resonate with me on a very deep level, like I said before. So I really appreciate
that's really cool.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right, cool.
All right.
Bye.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye.